Hello, everybody. A warm welcome. Namaskar to all of you. Hope you are all doing good, very good. And as promised, I am Tanaya back again with all of you with yet another conversation brought to you from the house of Team Cradle. Thank you so much for joining in. In our sessions so far, in fact, in all our sessions, we have emphasized on the need of having a guru or a spiritual master in our lives. We talked about how having a guru helps us in an overall, a holistic development, how it leads us towards life and growth. Give me a moment, please. Sometimes it gets difficult because when your phone, you forget to, keep it in the silent mode. I'm so sorry for it. So, as I was, mentioning, that in our sessions so far, we talked about the need of a guru, how having a guru helps us in our life and growth, in our holistic development. Now, we also have talked about the messages, the teachings of different world teachers or spiritual masters. Uh, this time, we will talk about the life and teachings of one such great spiritual master, Sree Sree Thakur Anukulchandra. We will talk about what is so special about Sri Sri Thakur. What are his teachings? What is his central philosophy? Why it is important for us to look at his teachings and reflect what can we learn from these teachings? Well, and that's why the topic for today's discussion is why Sri Sri Thakur Anukul Chandra. And to discuss the topic with me today, I have a special guest yet again. And this guest is a familiar face for Team Cradle. You have seen him, you have listened to him earlier as well. Well, may I please have him on screen? And I'm sure my audience who have seen the sessions earlier will be able to recognize instantly. Yes. There, right there on your screen is Mr. Surya Prakash Mahapatra. He has been in Cradle sessions, in many Cradle sessions as an anchor as well as a panelist. And by this time, I think he is quite familiar to all of you. We always love interacting with him, don't we? Uh, Mr. Surya is a leader, a leader in the L&D space, and he's associated currently with one large multinational organization. And again, Mr. Surya, it's my pleasure to host you and engage in a conversation with you.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure too.
Thank you so much. So, without much ado, let me straight away jump to the topic. And the topic for today, as I called out already, is why Sri Sri Thakur Anukul Chandra. And I'm sure my audience would be having so many questions in their mind when they see this topic. One question which definitely will come in people's mind is that there is so much of spiritual wisdom and abundance, I should say, of spiritual wisdom, yeah, be it in our scriptures, books, or now even in the social media. Then why the need of another spiritual master or a world teacher like Sri Sri Thakur Anukul Chandra? Your thoughts, please.
Sure. I think you are absolutely right when you say that there is just so much of spiritual knowledge that exists in this world in the form of books, artifacts, scriptures, and so on. There is abundance. Absolutely, there's no doubt. But in this context, I'm reminded of a poem by Charles Dickinson from his book, The Tale of Two Cities. And he writes in the first chapter, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair." So, absolutely, today we have plenty, but we have paucity. Today, there is great wisdom. At the same time, there is humongous amount of foolishness all around. So, if you log into the internet, and type the keyword stress management, you would find millions of blogs, articles, podcasts, videos. There are thousands of stress management coaches providing tips and techniques to deal with stress. In spite of this abundance of knowledge, we see, if you look at the research findings, 3 out of 4 employees at organizations are suffering from anxiety and stress and depression. So, what is this abundance of knowledge leading us to? So, if you look at this contradiction, this ambiguity, we clearly understand that there is a gap. There is a need for a living ideal or a world teacher like Sree Sree Thakur Anukulchandra, who can help us take this journey from the darkness to light, from foolishness to wisdom, from despair to hope. There is abundance of knowledge, but this knowledge exists in the form of information and data. But there is so little wisdom that exists, because wisdom is all about living values, beliefs, and demonstrating the conviction and translating those beliefs and values into action. I think we have abundance of knowledge, but we see very little on the ground in terms of action. Now, the question is, in a situation like this, how can we really uh, move out of this hopelessness situation and then make this journey towards hope? So, if you look at again the research findings, we will see that um, the percentage of educated people committing crime is increasing. The divorce rate among educated population is increasing. We also at the same time see um, that violations, unlawfulness is increasing in the educated population now. So I think this very clearly tells us that intellect does not drive behavior. Ideology does not drive change. Ideology does not drive change. So now, then what drives this change? What brings about transformation in human life? We will talk about it. And we'll also understand what Sree Sree Thakur Anukulchandra has said and how he has come to us as a panacea of hope in the midst of this hopelessness as we continue this discussion.
What a beautiful way to start the discussion, Mr. Surya. And I think you started with that famous quotation from Charles Dickens, and then went on to tell us that while there may be a lot of information, but information data is definitely different from what wisdom is. And what we're lacking currently is wisdom, and that is why if you look at the society today, there's so much of stress around, be it in the form of marriages getting split, or violations, or many other. We find stress everywhere, all the commodities today. And I was just wondering, today as I was ordering something on Flipkart, that all the commodities are just a click away from us. We need a cab, there is Uber, one click away. We need something, there's Flipkart, there is Amazon. But where is happiness? Where is peace? Where is the address? Does the world know today? And I think that is where maybe the need of a spiritual master. And we've talked about this aspect in our other sessions as well. And maybe we will delve a little deeper today in the discussion in the light of the philosophy of the great spiritual master Sree Sree Thakur Anukulchandra. So now what I'm interested to understand from you, and more so, I'm the ambassador for my audience today. So whatever questions I ask you today, Mr. Surya, are my audience questions, what my audience would be having in their mind today, okay, when they look at this topic. And obviously at the end of the session, they will also get a chance to interact with you, interact with us, and ask their questions. But as of now, I'm the representative of my audience. So, if we look at the philosophy of Sree Sree Thakur, and that is what we are more interested to know today, what is the central idea or the basic theme? What is at the core of Sree Sree Thakur's philosophy? If you can please throw some light and help us understand.
Absolutely. Great question. That is a continuation of the first question that you asked me.
Yeah,
And I'm,
absolutely.
I'm glad that you asked me this question. The central philosophy is essentially the most profound one that I'm going to share with you. And let me not try to use my words to explain his philosophy. I will share with you what Sree Sree Thakur Anukulchandra has said. Once a journalist from United States came to Sree Sree Thakur and asked him, Thakur, can you explain your philosophy to me in 2 words, in just 2 words? Sree Sree Thakur told him, be concentric. Be concentric means be with the center. Have a center in your life. The journalist asked him, Thakur, be concentric around whom? Sri Sri Thakur Anukulchandra replied, be concentric around your living ideal. The journalist, Michael James, asked Sri Sri Thakur, oh, okay. So what happens if I am concentric around Henry Ford? Sri Sri Thakur smiled at him and said, yes, if Henry Ford becomes your living ideal, then you can become a Henry Ford, but you cannot become Jesus Christ. The higher is your ideal, the higher is your life. The more elevated is your ideal, the more elevated is your life. If you really want to uplift and elevate your life, expand your life, then you must have the source of expansion as your love center. And that source of expansion is the source himself. So if you have that living ideal at the center of your life, and then you would be able to uplift and elevate your life. So we were in response to the first question, we are discussing ideology does not drive change. So then what drives change? The person in whom all the great ideas and ideologies have been embodied. If we accept him as our living ideal at the center of our life, then that can drive change. We also discussed that intellect does not drive change. It does not drive behavior. Intellect does not, there is no paucity of intellectuals in this world, but they do not live a happy and meaningful life. They do not inspire others to live a happy and meaningful life. Then what drives change? It's love, admiration, and service to your living ideal. That alone drives change in behavior, transformation in personality. So, who is that living ideal? That living ideal is the omniscient, omnipotent personality, the most reformed human being, the most evolved human being, the most transformed human being, who is manifestation of human perfection. So when you have such a living ideal like Sree Sree Thakur Anukulchandra, and when you have him at the center of your life, make him your love center, then the journey towards transformation begins, because it's the ideologies that you believe in have been embodied in that living ideal. I hope I was able
Absolutely.
to
No, absolutely. This
briefly
is very, very
talk about
profound. It is very, very profound. And I think gives us a lot of food for thought, because you are saying that ideology does not lead to change, neither does intellect. And we are so full of, ideas, ideology, intellect all around, and yet we are in search of happiness. But at the same time, you say that in a living ideal in whom uh, we see the amalgamation of the ideologies, and we have that love, admiration, and not only love and admiration, but active service towards that living ideal. That is when a transformation we see in our lives in the form of character, and which gets reflected in our habits. right? uh, and love definitely is at the core of everything, because many times, right, if it is written in a book that don't do this, okay, say it is written that, just a simple example, say it is written in a book that please do not tell a lie, okay, so I will read it. I might forget. But if somebody whom I love, like my father, he's saying that please do not tell a lie, and I feel that my father will feel hurt if I tell a lie, then I will not tell that lie. So that way, my habit, my behavior is getting changed. And why it is getting changed? Because I love my father, and I feel that my father doesn't want me to do it, I should not. So love is driving. So when love is at the center, and here we are talking, and while I'm giving the example of father, a living ideal, and uh, who is so expansive himself, right? And when you are having love towards him, we can only imagine the kind of change and transformation we will have in our life. And we are talking about a spiritual master, we are talking about a guru to be at the center of our lives.
Yes.
Absolutely. Satsang, when we look at as an institution, and which obviously Sree Thakur himself founded, we always hear it as a men-making institution, and Sree Thakur has emphasized on men making, men remaking, and that is what, when you talk about character building, as you talked about in the last, as a response to the last two questions, it is about character building, men making, as I understand. Okay, and so how do you think, what are the basic tenets of men making and men remaking, in line with the ideology of Sree Thakur?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm really happy that your questions are, all linked to the previous questions.
I'm just trying to pick your thoughts from what you are mentioning in your responses, and just trying to pick from the same thread and carry it on,
Absolutely.
Mr. Surya.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we talked about human transformation. We talked about transformation in personality, character, behavior, and that's pretty much linked to man making. And when you talk about man making, and if you look at the contemporary society today, the scientists today are doing adequate research on how to breed pedigree dogs, how to breed great horses, great cows. But what about bringing great human beings to this world? That's where lies the essence of man making. The famous Nobel laureate Alexis Carrel says, the man of science has forgotten the science of man. How profound is this statement? The man of science, in in the age of scientific advancement, has forgotten the science of man. Sree Sree Thakur Anukulchandra has brought us the science of man, how to bring great human beings to this world. And there lies the fundamental ideology of Sree Thakur, which talked about be concentric. So if we are concentric around the living ideal, and that's where the man making process can begin. Man making begins before the man is born. So it's like when we talk about eugenics, it's all about bringing superior human beings to this earth. So we know that human beings are the most superior, they're the supreme species on earth. But the question is, do human beings realize their true potential? Human beings are born with unlimited, infinite potential. But what happens to majority of human beings? So Sri Thakur Anukulchandra says, every human being is unique. Every human being has some distinct qualities, and he calls them by sisters or instincts, inborn instincts. And he says, through genetics, every human being acquires those spatial characteristics and spatial qualities. But if the system of marriage is not compatible, then we might lose some of those distinctiveness that existed, or with our forefathers. I think we'll talk more about ideal marriage, etc. Subsequently. But now, the instincts or distinctiveness with which the man is born, often man does not recognize that. His parents do not recognize that, and that's where the problem happens. That's where is the need of a living ideal, who is omniscient, who is omnipotent, who is the most reformed human being, who has understood the science of man. We need such a man who can bring that science, who can help us understand our distinctive qualities, who can help parents understand the distinctive, unique qualities of their children. And that is the beginning of man making. If that does not happen, if man does not understand what his distinctiveness, what his distinct, unique qualities are, inborn instincts are, he or she is never going to flourish. He or she is never going to grow and display those qualities. So this living ideal that I'm talking about, the the life teacher, is also known as the fulfiller of the instincts. So he can help you identify and recognize your distinctiveness, and he can also help you grow and develop and sharpen your instincts. And if a man achieves that, man making becomes so simple.
Absolutely.
Transformation of human beings is becomes so simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And it when you talked about Sir Alexis Carroll, one poem came to mind. I think that was Wordsworth who wrote in one of his famous poems. I think that was Human Seasons or something, saying that, have I not reasons to lament what man has made of man? And I thought it's quite connects with what he has
Yeah.
told, that
Yes.
we have forgotten that science of man making. Another thing which you are talking about here very strongly is that the living ideal is is fulfiller the best, and he is able to help us realize our instincts, the unique instincts or the uniqueness we are born with, the infinite potential we are born with, and helps us realize it and helps us align those strengths or instincts accordingly. Brings one story to mind, and correct me, Mr. Surya, if I go wrong, because you know more about Sree Sree Thakur, his life and teachings more than I do. So I heard that story that once a mother used to come to Sree Sree Thakur and used to complain that my son does not study, he only watches movies. He only watches movies. And obviously, parents do not like kids wearing, watching movies. And that was the complaint of that mother. So Sree Sree Thakur used to tell that kid, that okay, fine, you watch movies, please go watch movies, and tell me the stories, what you watch. So the kid, obviously, he had to come and tell Shishi Thakur the stories. So obviously he started watching good movies, because otherwise he would feel very embarrassed telling those stories to Thakur. Then days passed that way. He used to come tell Shishi Thakur the stories. Shishi Thakur used to enjoy those stories, and then Shishi Thakur started telling him that please start writing those stories, what you understand of the stories, and keep on reading out to me. And same the kid used to do. And eventually, by doing this, the writing capability and everything, because his instinct was aligned in that direction. Okay, and Sri Sri Thakur helped him realize that, and I think eventually that kid grew up to make it big in the film industry. So I have forgotten the names and the characters here, but this is the essence of the story that was there. So I thought maybe it is
This is a
something which
true
you
story.
wanted to tell us, and I wanted to connect it to it.
Yes, this is a true story. Yes. And this is how fulfiller the best, or the living ideal, helps help this child identify his true instincts and true potential, and not only helped him identify, also he helped him grow and develop that and make it really big in his life and profession.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think another, so would you like to please, elaborate more on the men making part? Because you talked about marriage, and I'm sure apart from marriage, there are other parts as well. So, if you can
Right.
please touch upon it, and then maybe in the later part, I will definitely ask you questions, as I pick your thoughts and try to get more out of you to learn more about Sri Sri Thakur and his philosophy.
Yes, yes, I can talk about it. So, Sri Thakur has talked about biological efficiency or biological superiority, and then he says biological superiority is the result of your biological makeup. The biological makeup is what we get through the process of birth, right? So the biological makeup is destroyed, then biological superiority cannot be achieved, right? So that's why he has emphasized marriage a lot, but we'll talk about it a little later. Now, when he talks about biological superiority, he talks about two things. We have already discussed about instincts, which are basically the distinct qualities that we inherit from our parents through genes. Sri Sri Thakur is also talking about another set of traits. He has talked about 9 traits. He says if a human being possesses those 9 traits, he can become really great in his life or her life. And everybody has those 9 traits. But the question is to what extent? Thakur has listed out those traits. These are admiration towards superior, willpower, adherence to the living ideal, tendency towards unity, presence of mind, sympathy, power of resistance, cautious inquisitiveness, and intelligence. These are the 9 traits that each one of us has, but to what measure, to what extent? If a man has great willpower, great presence of mind, great inquisitiveness, admiration towards elders and superiors, adherence to living ideal, has the power of resistance and intelligence. He doesn't have to worry about it. But today we see many people in this world who lack willpower, who lack sympathy, who lack presence of mind, who who are extremely talented people, but they lack love and empathy. Extremely talented, but they cannot work with other people. They cannot achieve unity and collaboration. Admiration towards elders is such a powerful trait which is missing, and inquisitiveness and intelligence, and power of resistance. Power of resistance is ability to deal with obstacles in life. Sri Thakur is saying man evolves through his or her interaction with the environment. Environment gives us impulses, and we respond to every impulse that we receive from the environment. And our ability to respond to the impulse. If somebody talks to me nicely, I talk to that person nicely in return. But if somebody is scolding me, I don't know how to deal how I should respond. I end up getting into a conflict. So ability to respond to impulses from environment, that is the true ability. And right from our childhood, infancy, because education is one of the important pillars as Thakur has talked about. The education of the child begins right from his or her infancy, when he or she starts observing the world around him or her through his sense organs, and whatever he receives through his sense organs are impulses and stimuli from the environment. And who gives him the first impulse? The mother and the father, then the immediate family members. And through their conduct and behavior, child learns how to respond. Because if the child sees his father not treating his mother properly, that's what he learns. If the child sees that his parents do not respect their parents, that's what he learns. That's he knows that this is how I need to respond. That's how his learning becomes cemented. By the time he comes to the school, his destiny has already been decided. His future has already been decided. So the essence of man making then lies in ideal marriage, thereafter, ideal education. And ideal education, before it starts in the school, it has to start at home. And the nine qualities that I talked about: admiration to superiors, sympathy, adherence, willpower, presence of mind, inquisitiveness. Then I talked about intelligence. Those qualities develop as the child learns to receive impulses and respond to impulses. For example, the power of resistance, because we receive obstacles and challenges from the environment all the time. It's our power of resistance helps us overcome those challenges. So, the way parents prepare the child through their own conduct, behavior, and mannerisms, that's how they shape the destiny of the child. Small carelessness can impact the child's destiny. Acharya Dev Sri Dada was sitting at the Nat Mandap. Many devotees were sitting surrounding him. There was a small child who was playing in front of the Nat Mandap. The child fell down. The mother was standing nearby. The child started crying non-stop. The mother tried to console him. The child was not willing to stop. The mother then said, "Son, listen, this floor has given you pain. You fell down on the floor. Floor has given you pain. I am now going to thrash the floor." Then she started hitting the floor with a stick. Started hitting the floor again and again and again. Child within no time became silent and quiet, because the child probably realized that revenge has been taken. The floor gave me punishment. Now the floor has been penalized. Acharya Dev Sri Siddhada was observing this. He called the mother and he told in a reassured tone, "Mother, whatever you did today, never ever repeat that again. Through this action, you have planted the seed of revenge in your child. Today he learns that if he receives pain, he has to give pain in return. If somebody hurts him, he has to hurt him back in return. If he receives harm from somebody, he has to give harm. The seed of revenge has been planted in him." See how sometimes parents, instead of taking the child on the path of transformation, progress, evolution, and elevation, can damage the progress of the child. This is a huge subject. I think we can talk for hours
Absolutely.
together. This philosophy of Sree Sree
And
Thakur Anukulchandra on man making, because he has taught us the science of man.
Sree Sree Thakur has emphasized, as you said rightly, on the right marriage and obviously the right parenting. And especially, there is a book called Women's Code, which I read. And people can search it up, I think, in our satsang page itself. Grab a copy. So it's written for women, because our Sri Sri Thakur considered we women as very, very special. And he said
Yes.
that a mother is so important to a child, the education of the child. And he says that you are you're the basis of the education of the child. You form the foundation. And so it is so important, for you to do it right. And he, in one of his messages, he said that when the child starts blabbering, and I think that would be the age of around 1.5 to 2 years. I think from that
Yes.
age, he has told us that
Yes.
whatever you teach that child from that age, when he starts blabbering, starts speaking little, that will become the main, the primary in your child at a later point in time. And if you remember, and my audience also, if they have watched this session on education that we did with Mr. Biplab Loho Chaudhary, I think a few months back, he also talked so much about childhood education, and he specifically talked about that the neurons get formed inside most of the neurons by the age of 7 to 10. Okay, and after that, whatever you teach by that child, the child up to that age, stays on, because your neurons are all formed. So that's why parenting and childhood education is so very important, and many times we miss out on those important aspects, and that's why we are not able to create good human beings create and nurture good human beings. And I think a brilliant example you gave, and many times we see that happening, hitting the floors when the kid falls down. But what a beautiful message out there. And when you were talking about those 9 qualities, Mr. Surya, I was like, thinking about the leadership competencies, which we so much talk about these days in the corporates. Okay, inquisitive, curiosity, then empathy, and many of those, right? But then obviously we miss out on many things like that admiration for a living ideal. And
Yeah,
that's why maybe we are not able to, as a society, we are not able to, get to that level. While obviously we create leaders, we create great professionals, so we work, on building those competencies. But I think if we focus on these 9 qualities right from the start, right from the childhood itself, we definitely would be able to
absolutely.
go a long way in terms of making good human beings. And we are all responsible and accountable both for the same. Uh, so good. I think the discussion is going good. We are learning more from you, Mr. Surya, more about the teachings and philosophy of Sree Thakur. And I think all of us need to reflect as we listen to the discussion. It is not only about listening, going back, forgetting. It is about reflection at every step. And only when we listen and listen to understand, I can always listen to respond back, but when I listen to understand, listen to reflect, and that is when my listening, gets all the more meaningful, and I'm able to imbibe some of the things in my actions, in my behavior, in my habits. So, in the response to my last question, I think you mentioned about uh, the environment, individual, the impulse from the environment side, how the individual responds to it. So, I would want you to elaborate more on this, because I think these are the 3 pillars, obviously, in what the messages of Sree Thakur are. So, if you can please, throw some light on this, and most importantly, help us understand how these 3 aspects, ideal, environment, and the individual, all of us, are connected. So that would really be helpful.
Absolutely. So, when we talk about the 3 pillars, there are 2 sets of 3 pillars. One is uh, Diksha, initiation, education, and marriage. These are 3 fundamental pillars of the human life and human transformation. And when we talk about the society at large, transformation of a nation, transformation of the humankind, then we again need 3 pillars. The 3 pillars are individual, ideal, and environment. You can see me holding a tripod, and this tripod has 3 legs.
Yeah, yeah,
If it has only 2 legs, it cannot stand. It needs
absolutely.
all the 3 legs to stand. Similarly, if you don't strengthen the process of initiation, education, and marriage, the human being cannot stand. And similarly, in the larger society and mankind, in the universe, if you don't strengthen, if you don't have the synchronization between these 3 pillars, individual, ideal, and environment, this human society, the humankind will get devastated. It will be on the rocks. Now, I will quickly touch upon the first set of 3 pillars and then quickly move to this one. So, through the process of initiation, um, a human being becomes concentric around the living ideal. Initiation, Sree Thakur calls it's no, it's called diksha. The word within the word diksha there is the word daksha, which is efficiency. So efficiency comes through diksha. Dakshata comes from diksha. So when we say that somebody has taken initiation from the living ideal, he or she has been initiated into the clue of an efficient life. That is the true meaning of initiation. That's where the human man making journey begins, and then capability and the 9 traits that we talked about, etc. Education only evolves those qualities that we are born with, and what we learn from our living ideal. And then the process of marriage brings leads to good progeny, bringing good human beings to the world, and so on. Now, in the larger humankind, we see, we all of us have an individual life, and then when we get married, then we have a conjugal life. When we have children, of course, we also have our own parents. We have family life. When we look at our neighborhood, that becomes a social life. And then when we look at the larger spectrum, that becomes our national or universal life, right? So Sree Sree Thakur talks about this 5 lives, Pancha Mahajivan, every human being has. So I need balance between these 5 lives: my own individual life, conjugal life, familial life, social life, and national life. If there is incoherence between these 5 lives, suppose I remember reading a book by Dr. Revati Mohan Biswas, who did research on Sree Sree Thakur Anukulchandra's ideology. Once an IAS officer met him, and he said, "I do not agree with the ideology of your guru. I do not need a living ideal at the center of my life. I'm educated, I'm well established, I'm successful, I'm an IAS officer, I am respected by people in the society. I don't need a living ideal. I'm all right, I'm absolutely fine." Dr. Biswas asked him, Mr. Gupta, the name of the IAS officer was Gupta. He said, "Mr. Gupta, when you come back home, how often do you meet your wife at home?" He says, "Well, probably 6 out of 7 days I don't meet her. She's usually in her kitty parties with her friends or in the mall shopping. I do not meet her every day." Um, he asked Mr. Gupta, are your children obedient? Do they obey everything that you say?" He said, "No, my children are slowly becoming little naughty and then rude. I'm a little worried about their behavior and mannerisms." Dr. Revati Mohan Biswas said, "Mr. Gupta, you are successful. You are a well-established professional. You are an IAS officer. Maybe the government of India will give you the Padma Sree title in near future for your professional excellence. But are you a happy man?" Mr. Gupta was quiet. So this story, which is a real incident, talks about the importance of the coordination between individual, conjugal, familial, social, and um, national lives. And my my wife, my family, my society, my country, they form part of my environment. I am the individual. So how do I
Absolutely.
live in harmony with my environment? How do I stay in harmony? I do not get along with my neighbors. When I step out of home, I don't see them eye to eye. I don't look at them. We don't exchange greetings. When I am at distress, they don't come and help me. I don't do the same thing. Sri Sri Thakur Anukulchandra is saying, your environment is the only source of your nourishment for you. Don't ignore the environment. Nurture your environment. Be serviceable to the environment. In one of our Cradle webinars, if you remember, Dr. Shrutanu Chakrabarti was sharing a great example. He was saying, if a mosquito sits on your forehead, your hand goes and drives it away. If the mosquito comes back again and sits on the forehead, your hand goes again and tries to drive it away. He says, the mosquito comes again, the hand goes again. He says, the hand never asks, the mosquito is biting the forehead. Why should I worry? Why should I drive away the mosquito? It is not biting me. And I am not getting anything from the forehead. Why should I bother about it? But Sree Sree Thakur says, the hand never says that. Whenever the hand feels that the human existence is in danger, at risk, the hand goes and tries to protect the whole human being. And if any organ in the existence of the human being is endangered, is at danger, every other body organ, they promptly get into action to protect. That's how the human body, human anatomy is based on interdependence. Each organ helps every other organ. The lungs, the heart is dependent on the lungs. The lungs are dependent on the nose. You know, each organ is dependent on other organs and they work in complete harmony with each other. That is interdependence. And that is the essential message for me and my relationship with the environment. But how do I make sure that I and my friend, I and my wife, I and my children, I and my neighbor have a great, harmonious, interdependent relationship? That is possible only when we can become interinterested only when we have a common interest in life. If all of us don't have a common interest, then we cannot be interinterested. So for us to become interinterested, to become interested in each other's welfare, well-being, happiness, we need to have a common interest. And that common interest is the living ideal, the teacher, the guru in life. If you have that common ideal at the center, then the triangle is complete. We have the ideal at the center, and then the individual and the environment. I hope I answered your question.
Beautiful, I think, and it will stay with us because you showed us the tripod as well. That it is important that both all the three sides are there for our life to stand, just as a tripod stands on three legs. So it is important that our life also stands on this three pillars, and wherein the ideal is at the center, and we are connected. The environment and us as individuals are connected to the individual, and that's to the ideal, and that's how the triangle of life, of expansion, of growth forms.
Absolutely. And if
And let us
in the
all
tripod,
strive.
if one of the legs is not there, then the tripod cannot stand. So in my life, if ideal does not exist, what I'm going to do it only with environment.
Absolutely,
If
absolutely, and that is what.
ideal exists, environment exists, I don't exist, then what's the point?
And very recently, right, you talked about interestedness and how having a common ideal, common interest drives all of us. We are even now in the midst of a COVID pandemic, right, though it is ebbing, which is a good news for all of us. But we have seen, right, how communities have got formed, how communities have helped each other come out of the crisis. And especially here, since we're talking about Sri Thakur and satsang, and I'm sure that has happened in other organizations as well, but I can speak of this because I've seen it on the ground in Bangalore. When people were falling sick, people needed to get to hospital, people needed a bed, beds were not available. How people came together. People are not connected by blood, but they have a spiritual master, they have a guide, they have a living ideal at the center, and that way they're connected to the people around. Okay.
Absolutely.
And by that interest only, people came forward, helped. I think that was complete dedicated work which people did for each other, and having a common ideal at the center helped us do it more, do it with more energy, do it with more enthusiasm. Okay.
Absolutely. You
So
shared
I
a
think
great example.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And another thing, right, I was recently attending one conference wherein, as a special guest, the great chef, he's very popular these days, Mr. Vikas Khanna, he came over. He was our special guest. And the anchor asked him that what is the secret of your success, because currently he's hugely successful. He has a chain of restaurants across the globe, and everything is coming in different shows. So the anchor asked him that what is the secret of your success. He said that every life has to have a center of gravity. We all have to have a center of gravity, which pulls
Yeah,
us, keeps us anchored. And he said that for me the center of gravity is my mother. Okay. And I was so overwhelmed by hearing this, because I could find the connect to the message of Sree Sree Thakur, be concentric. Okay, while
absolutely.
in case of Vikas, it was his mother, but we are talking about that, the higher the ideal is, the higher, the more expansive your center is, the more expansive your life becomes. But I could see that connect, which you are saying. So people are increasingly maybe realizing this, that it is very important to stay anchored, to have a center in our lives. And that is what we are also trying in doing sessions like this, Mr. Surya. Talking about the need of a spiritual master, talking about the need of a guru, talking about the need of a center in our lives. And, just as you said, that intellect, ideology, ideas, everything may be there. But this is not leading to change. This is not leading to human transformation. And that is where the need of a center and a spiritual guide comes. So thank you, Mr. Surya. I think we talked about the central idea of Sree Sree Thakur's philosophy, and we started with where the need comes from. Okay, we started with the need. We talked about the central theme in Sree Sree Thakur's teachings. We talked about initiation, education, and marriage as the three important pillars of that ideology, and you touched upon each of those. We also talked about how it is important for us to form to be aware, and the triangle which you mentioned about, the triangle between the ideal, individual, and the environment, and getting connected, and that's what gives our life a balance. And you talked about the Panchamahajivan, the individual life, family life, society life, conjugal life, and the national life. And again, we are responsible, as Sri Thakur called out, right? That you are responsible for your own, your family, the society, and the nation, the present and the future. So we have to, unless we take actions, unless we align, unless we act, unless we get aligned to a center, all these things will not come in, order, come in balance. So thank you. And I think I have exhausted my questions at this point in time. Uh, Obviously, I want to ask questions, but then, more than the questions, it is the time which I'm mindful about. So I would like to quickly go to my audience to get some questions from there. And I'm sure there will be many because this was quite an interesting conversation, I should say, Surya. And thank you, Mr. Surya. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Okay, there's a question from Swati. Sarkar, eugenics, varnashram, economic development, permanent elevation of poverty. Has Thakurji's ideology correlated this, and is that practically possible?
Right. So this is a great question. So I think Swati Sarkar has brought out quite a few aspects: eugenics, varnashram, economic development, permanent alleviation of poverty. So let me start with poverty. Sree Thakur Anukulchandra says poverty is not a condition; it is a disease, and this disease can be cured. It can be treated. So, and then Thakur says, what is the reason why somebody gets this disease? Sri Thakur is saying it is our own distorted character which leads to this disease. So, what are these lacuna in a character which lead to this disease? Thakur says inferiority complex, laziness, um, blaming others for your own fault, not taking initiative, lack of inquisitiveness. All these traits can lead to a disease called poverty. So if you become more efficient, if you give up our laziness and become hardworking, if we stop blaming others for our own faults and for our own situation, and if we stop being stop having inferiority complex, then we will be able to overcome, we'll be able to treat this disease called poverty. Now, if we gain these qualities called efficiency, hard work, and then empathy, and not blaming others for our own fault, rather helping others and enlisting others' help, collaborating with others, etc. Once our poverty goes away, of course, that leads to economic development. If every individual in the society becomes a man or woman of character, and with that strong character, they remove them, they throw away poverty from their lives. If everybody collectively becomes, I'm not saying wealthier, but if they collectively become economically better off, the country will obviously become better off. Because according to Sree Sree Thakur's ideology, if we have a living science ideal at the center of our lives, and if that living ideal becomes the common interest for everybody in the society, then everybody will stand up for each other. The rich will help the poor become better off financially. The wise will help the ignorant. The strong will help the weak. And obviously, as a nation, as a society, will not only become financially stronger, will also become stronger in character, behavior, prosperity, happiness, and everything. What is the role of eugenics and varnashram? Um, Varnashram, if you look at Varnashram, Varna is nothing but a grouping of similar instincts. We talked about spatial qualities and instincts when we're talking about man making. So, Sree Sree Thakur Anukulchandra says that every human being is unique. Every human being is born with distinct qualities, inborn instincts. So, when similar instincts are combined, they become a Varna, right? Eugenics is about breeding of superior human beings. Behind the science of eugenics is the science of marriage. If you have ideal marriage, genetically compatible marriage, because science has taught us that there are 23 chromosomes, and each come from the father and the mother, and they form a zygote. And these chromosomes, out of this 46, only two determine the gender. The rest determine the biological makeup of the child, right? Because when the cell division happens, when the millions of cells are formed, each cell carries the same genetic code. Each cell carries the same characteristics, and that leads to the biological makeup of the human being, as Sree Sree Thakur calls it. And when we talk about human superiority, when we talk about biological efficiency, that is dependent on eugenics, and eugenics is dependent on ideal marriage. That's why Sree Sree Thakur Anukulchandra has emphasized ideal genetically compatible marriage. And the genetically compatible marriage, like if the seed is the father and the soil is the mother, to have a great sapling which will grow into a great tree, we need superior quality seed and superior quality soil, and that is compatible uh, union. So if compatible marriage happens, that will lead to better progeny, and that will lead to better human beings born with strong character. And if human beings have strong character, and if they lead an ideal centric life, having a ideal at the center of their life, elevation of poverty is just a small thing. They will achieve many more things in their life.
Hope that answers your question, Miss Swati Sarkar. Thank you so much, Mr. Surya. Okay, any other question? May I please get it on screen? How do you see the impact of presence of spiritual master in professional life? That is what Mr. Manish Punjabi is asking us. The impact of spiritual master in professional life.
Manishji, I love this question because I'm often asked this question. Being a professional myself, I'm always asked this question. And many a time people ask me, well, how have you become a successful professional being spiritual? They probably don't see a relationship between the two. Of course, I don't claim that I become professionally successful, but whatever reasonable success I have achieved in my professional career, often people believe that you are spiritual, but to become professionally successful, you need to become aggressive. You need to become you need to be marching ahead. You need to show aggression in your conversations, in meetings and discussions. As a leader, you need to demonstrate these traits. I tell them that I don't know much about that, but having a spiritual master at the center of my life, I have learned humility. I have learned empathy. I have learned how to love others. I have loved I have understood interinterestedness, and I have learned the art of collaboration as a spiritual, as following a spiritual master in my life. I have learned these traits from my master. And my dear friend, I asked the friend who asked me once, um, don't you think that you need to demonstrate empathy to your team members, to your customers every day? Don't you have to collaborate with your colleagues? Don't you have to demonstrate interinterestedness if you collectively want to succeed as an organization? Don't you need to demonstrate love for your team members? Um, so I don't know about aggression, but I know that these traits that I have acquired through the teachings of my spiritual master, Sree Sree Thakur Anukulchandra, they have immensely helped me, an average human being like me, to become successful to whatever extent. And I give all credit to the spiritual master for that.
And very recently, Mr. Surya, I was going through your LinkedIn profile, and maybe my audience can also have a look at the LinkedIn profile of Mr. Surya, and some beautiful comments written by his ex-colleagues or managers, team members there, which shows the impact of Shree Thakur, the spiritual guide in Mr. Surya's life. And when I was reading actually those messages, which is written, I was actually reflecting upon it. That is the impact of having a spiritual guide, and those messages were so beautiful, which people have written for you on the wall of LinkedIn. So I thought I'll just talk about that as well. Though you were very humble enough to say that okay, I have not made it so big, but then I think if people go there, people will understand what I'm talking about.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other question which we can take at this point, because I think we are at time. Okay, Mr. Deepak Kumar Das, what is the one sentence to sum up the path to remain most blissful? I think that is what people are looking for these days. Where is bliss? Where is happiness? Where is peace?
Deepakji has asked a very, very, profound question. What, and then he has asked me, he has given me the very difficult task of summing it up in one sentence. I understand bliss as happiness. So I remember what, I will not use my brain to answer this question. I will quote Sree Sree Thakur. Sree Sree Thakur says, give happiness to others, you will find happiness in plenty. Give peace to others, you will find peace in abundance. I believe that is the one best way to remain most blissful in life.
What a beautiful message to bring our session today to its end. Thank you so much, Mr. Surya. As always, I think whenever you join us, I think it feels very much home, because you are a family member of the Cradle family, and
Yes.
so we always get to learn, and that way all the speakers we have got in our as a part of a Cradle series have been really awesome, and in every session I personally have learned a lot from you all. And it is my second session with you, Mr. Surya, as a part of this series. So, again, a great learning. And I'm sure our audience has also got enriched. And most importantly, our audience have got to know about our spiritual guide, Sree Sree Thakur, his life, his teachings, his philosophy, and the elements which we need to learn from the teachings of the great master. Thank you so much, all of you. And I wish, I pray that the life and messages of the world teachers like Shree Thakur, let those lives and teachings keep inspiring us, keep guiding us, and keep and let us keep moving ahead, having a center in our lives, having guru in our lives, and let us tread the path of life and growth. Thank you so much, all of you. Wishing you lots of bliss, happiness, peace, lots of action, and here both myself and Mr. Surya signing off with a promise to come back again with another session from the house of Team Cradle. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Namaskar.